Chris leaned back in his chair. The investigation was over. The evidence was undeniable. He had forensic proof that could send people to federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He had destroyed Caryn's master plan without raising his voice. But the room was still a powder keg, and Matt Roloff was the match that was about to be struck. The fallout from this moment wouldn't just end the meeting. It would threaten to end the show, the farm, and the freedom of everyone involved. The silence in that boardroom was heavier than the machinery Matt used to terraform his land. It was the sound of an entire worldview shattering. For decades, Matt Roloff operated on the belief that he was the smartest person in the room, the one who could manipulate reality to fit his vision. But as he stared at the dossier Chris Marek had laid out, the horrifying truth settled in. He wasn't the player. He was the pawn. The betrayal cut deeper than just the money. It was the realization that while he was busy pushing his children away and lowballing his ex-wife to secure a future with Caryn, Caryn was systematically securing a future without him. According to the insiders who have pieced together this dramatic climax, Matt didn't explode in rage. He went completely numb. He looked at Caryn, not with anger, but with a terrifying clarity. The woman who had whispered in his ear that his kids were lazy, that Amy was greedy, and that he deserved more, had been engineering his isolation. She isolated him so that he would trust only her, and in that trust, she found the keys to the kingdom. Caryn's reaction, allegedly, was a masterclass in deflection. Witness accounts suggest she didn't apologize. She didn't break down. She doubled down. She reportedly looked Matt dead in the eye and told him that she did it to protect him from himself. She claimed that his spending was out of control, that his projects were bleeding the farm dry, and that she siphoned the money to create a safety net that he couldn't touch until he retired. It was a brilliant, twisted justification. She tried to frame her embezzlement as an act of love. She tried to convince him that stealing $5 million was actually effective financial management. But Chris Marek wasn't letting that slide. He pointed to page 42 of the binder. It showed a transfer of $200,000 from the hidden trust to a personal account held by Caryn's son. "Is paying off your son's debts part of Matt's retirement plan, Caryn?" Chris asked, his voice cutting through her narrative like a razor. That was the nail in the coffin. There was no spinning that. There was no safety net excuse for funneling farm money to her biological family, while Matt's own children were being told there was no money for them. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. Amy, who had been the victim of their narrative for years, suddenly held the power. She looked at Matt, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't see the arrogance. She saw a broken man. She saw the father of her children realizing he had been played for a fool. But Amy is smart. She realized that if this goes public, if the IRS gets wind of the initial skim that Matt thought was a partnership, the farm is gone. The fines, the back taxes, and the potential prison time would liquidate everything. The legacy she built for Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob would be auctioned off by the federal government. This is where Chris Marek's genius truly shines. He didn't bring this to the police. He brought it to the table. He created a stalemate. He looked at Matt and Caryn and laid out the terms. This wasn't just an exposure, it was a hostage negotiation. Chris reportedly told them that the binder stays closed and the authorities stay out of it under one condition: total restitution and a complete restructuring of the farm's ownership. The theory circulating among the most connected sources is that Chris gave Caryn an ultimatum. She could walk away right now, sign over the rights to the Arizona Trust, and disappear from the business operations forever, or he would drive that binder to the district attorney's office himself. It was the ultimate checkmate. If Caryn fought it, she would go to prison for fraud. If Matt fought it, he would go to prison for tax evasion. They were trapped in a cage of their own making, and the quiet realtor held the key. Every time money moves, it leaves a footprint. Even cash, when it is eventually spent or deposited, creates a ripple. Chris started by analyzing the public records of the farm's vendors. Matt is a man who loves projects. He is constantly building, renovating, and landscaping. Chris noticed a pattern in the invoices that Matt would casually complain about during their buddy hangouts. Matt would gripe about the rising cost of specialized lumber or the outrageous fees for custom metalwork. Chris, nodding along like a supportive friend, would mentally catalog these company names. Later, under the cover of night, he would run background checks on these vendors. This was the first loose thread. According to exclusive theories from sources close to the investigation, Chris discovered that 3 of the farm's major suppliers, companies that were allegedly billing the farm hundreds of thousands of dollars over 2 years, didn't physically exist. There were no lumber yards. There were no metal fabrication shops. These were shell companies. They were registered agents with nothing more than a P.O. box in a strip mall in Phoenix, Arizona. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Arizona is Caryn's turf. It is where she and Matt were building their new life. The theory was becoming a terrifying reality. The farm was paying for services it never received, and that money was flowing directly into entities that trace back to associates linked to Caryn's past, not Matt's. This was the moment the narrative shifted. Up until this point, Chris assumed Matt and Caryn were in it together, equally complicit in hiding money from Amy and the kids. But as Chris dug deeper into the metadata of these transactions, he found something that reportedly made his blood run cold. The bank accounts associated with these Arizona shell companies were not joint accounts. Matt Roloff's name was nowhere near them. The signature authority belonged to a single individual, hidden behind a trust, but the recovery email address linked to the banking profile was a variation of a personal email Caryn had used years prior. The implications were staggering. Matt Roloff wasn't the mastermind. He was the mark. He was the unwitting accomplice in his own robbery. Matt thought they were skimming money to build their future, but the evidence suggested Caryn was skimming the skim. She was allegedly taking the dirty money they had stolen together and diverting it into a private stronghold that Matt couldn't touch. It was a betrayal of Shakespearean proportions. Matt was burning bridges with his children, destroying his reputation, and cheating his ex-wife, all to fill a treasure chest that he didn't have the key to. Chris had the smoking gun. He had the digital breadcrumbs leading from the pumpkin patch in Oregon straight to these offshore-style accounts disguised as domestic vendors. But he needed more than just spreadsheets. He needed to catch them in the act of a transfer to prove intent. He watched the calendar. He knew the cycle. The biggest influx of cash happens after the pumpkin season closes, when the final tally is done. Chris waited for the post-season wrap-up meeting. He knew that Matt and Caryn would be finalizing the official books to present to the accountants for tax season. This was the window. The tension during those final weeks was unbearable. Amy, completely unaware of the nuclear bomb Chris was building, kept asking him why he was so distant, why he was spending so much time on his computer. He couldn't tell her. He couldn't risk her reaction tipping off Matt. Amy wears her heart on her sleeve. She cannot lie. If she knew Matt was being played, she might have warned him out of pity or exploded in rage. Chris had to carry the burden alone. He compiled a dossier. It wasn't just a few papers. It was a comprehensive binder, categorized by date, transaction ID, and IP address. He mapped out the flow of funds with visual charts. He had photos of the empty storefronts in Phoenix that were supposedly shipping premium timber to the farm. He had the bank routing numbers. Matt and Caryn thought they had committed the perfect financial crime. Cash is untraceable, right? That is the oldest lie in the book, and it is exactly what they were banking on. For years, the narrative has been that Matt Roloff is a brilliant businessman and Caryn Chandler is the stabilizing force that saved the farm. But insider reports and a massive trail of digital evidence suggest that is nothing more than a carefully constructed mask. Today, we are exposing the secret $5 million shadow ledger. We are breaking down exactly how money from the chaotic pumpkin season allegedly vanished into phantom farm repairs and under-the-table expenses. But more importantly, we are going to reveal how Chris Marek, the man everyone dismissed as just the quiet, friendly realtor, reportedly utilized FBI-level forensic accounting techniques to catch Caryn red-handed. Matt thought he was the chess master, but he never realized he was playing against a grandmaster who was hiding in plain sight. This is the story of the betrayal that nearly destroyed the Roloff legacy, and the unexpected hero who burned it all to the ground. Before we dive into the evidence that is going to shake the entire fan base to its core, I need you to do one thing. If you want to see justice served and the truth finally come to light, hit that like button right now. It helps us get this information out to more people who have been hoodwinked by the show's editing. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the story we are unraveling today is only the beginning. You do not want to miss the updates coming next week. To understand the magnitude of this alleged $5 million deception, we have to go back. We have to look past the reality show cameras and look at the raw numbers of Roloff Farms. For over a decade, the pumpkin patch has been one of the most lucrative agritourism attractions in the Pacific Northwest. We are talking about tens of thousands of visitors, parking fees, entrance fees, overpriced popcorn, and merchandise. And for a vast majority of those years, a significant portion of that business was cash. Insider theories have long circulated on private forums that the reported income of the farm and the actual cash flow never quite matched up. The perfect story was always that farming is expensive, that the maintenance of the western town, the pirate ship, and the castle ate up all the profits. That was the shield Matt used whenever questions were raised. But let's look at the timeline. The moment Caryn Chandler transitioned from farm manager to Matt's personal partner, the financial landscape of the farm shifted drastically. According to exclusive theories emerging from sources close to the situation, this was not a coincidence. This was the inception of the shadow ledger. The premise was simple yet sophisticated. When you run a business that deals in heavy cash flow during a concentrated 30-day period in October, it is incredibly easy to siphon off a percentage if you control both the intake and the expense reports. The theory suggests that for every $10 that came in at the gate, $2 went into a separate pot. A pot that didn't exist on the official tax records. A pot that was allegedly designated for a future life that didn't include the farm, or the kids, or Amy. The stakes here were monumental. Amy Roloff was in the process of negotiating her exit. She spent 30 years building that empire, scrubbing floors, raising kids, and greeting guests. When the divorce happened, the valuation of the farm was the central point of contention. Matt cried poverty. He claimed the farm was a money pit, that the debt was high and the margins were razor thin. He painted a bleak picture to lower the valuation, ultimately buying Amy out for a price that many fans and insiders felt was insultingly low. But if these new reports of a shadow ledger are true, Matt wasn't just being stingy. He was artificially suppressing the value of the company by hiding millions of dollars in revenue. He was essentially telling Amy the pie was small, while he was hiding half the pie in the freezer. This is where the dynamic between Matt and Caryn becomes crucial. Matt is the visionary, the big picture guy, but he is notoriously chaotic with details. He starts projects he doesn't finish. He buys equipment he doesn't need. He needs an enforcer. He needs an executor. Enter Caryn. As the farm manager, she knew where every single body was buried financially. She knew the vendors, she knew the payroll, and she knew the loopholes.
Then came the day of the reckoning. It wasn't in a courtroom, and it wasn't at the police station. It was far more personal. It was a scheduled family business meeting where Matt, Caryn, Chris, and Amy were supposed to discuss property lines and fence maintenance. Matt sat at the head of the table, looking tired but confident, launching into his usual speech about how tight money was and how they all needed to tighten their belts for the coming year. Caryn sat next to him, nodding in agreement, playing the supportive partner, periodically chiming in about how hard they were working to keep the farm afloat. Chris let them talk. He let them spin the web. He watched Matt look Amy in the eye and tell her that the farm's profits were down 20%. He watched Caryn reach out and squeeze Matt's hand in a show of solidarity. And then Chris made his move. He didn't yell. He didn't slam the table. He simply reached down, pulled the thick black binder from his bag, and slid it across the mahogany table. The sound of the heavy binder hitting the wood was the only noise in the room.
I think we need to talk about the Arizona accounts, Chris said. His voice was steady, devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a man who held all the aces. Matt looked confused. What Arizona accounts? The house account? No, Chris replied, locking eyes with Caryn. The vendor accounts, the lumber, the soil, the consulting fees, the $5 million that has left this farm in the last 36 months. The color reportedly drained from Caryn's face so fast it looked like she might faint. Matt, still not grasping the full picture, tried to laugh it off. Chris, you don't understand how complex these finances are. We have expenses you don't see. I see everything, Matt, Chris countered. I see the receipts for the phantom fencing. I see the invoices for the invisible repairs. And I see exactly whose signature is on the withdrawal slips. Chris reached over and flipped the binder open to page 1. It was a graphic flow chart. At the top was Roloff Farms. Arrows pointed down to Shell Company A, Shell Company B, and Shell Company C. And below all of them, feeding into one final destination, was a private trust controlled solely by Caryn Chandler. The silence that followed was suffocating. Matt stared at the chart. He looked at the numbers. He recognized the fake vendor names he had signed checks for, believing they were part of the shared strategy. He looked at the final destination. He looked at Caryn. For the first time in years, the fog lifted from Matt Roloff's eyes. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't looking at his partner. He was looking at his parasite. Caryn tried to speak. She stammered something about tax planning, about moving money to protect assets for their retirement. She tried to pivot, looking at Matt with desperate eyes. Matt, you know we talked about diversifying. You know I handle the details so you don't have to worry. Matt didn't know about the secondary trust. Did he know about Caryn? Chris interjected, cutting her off with surgical precision. Because according to these bank records, this money isn't legally his anymore. It's yours. If he leaves you, or if you leave him, that money is gone. He signed it away to vendors that don't exist, who paid a consultant that is you. Amy sat frozen. She looked from Chris to Matt to Caryn. The magnitude of the deception was too big to process instantly. But she saw the look on Matt's face. It wasn't anger yet. It was devastating. It was the look of a man who realized that the person sleeping next to him had been sharpening a knife for years. Matt's hands started to shake. He picked up the binder, flipping through the pages, seeing the dates. Dates when he was in the hospital. Dates when he was fighting with Zach. Dates when he was pleading poverty to Amy. While he was distracted by the family drama, the account was bleeding out. The perfect financial crime wasn't a partnership. It was a solo operation, and he was the victim. The narrative we are hearing suggests that Matt believed they were partners in this scheme. He believed they were building a war chest together, perhaps to retire in Arizona in luxury, away from the muddy fields of Oregon. He trusted her, explicitly because he had to. If she went down, he went down. It was mutually assured destruction. For years, this system reportedly worked flawlessly. They explained away the missing money as capital improvements. They claimed that the cost of lumber had tripled, that the cost of labor had skyrocketed. They created a labyrinth of receipts for consulting fees and management expenses that were vague enough to pass a casual glance, but specific enough to balance the books on the surface. They grew arrogant. They watched as Amy moved off the property, feeling like they had won. They watched as the kids, Zach and Jeremy, were pushed out of the negotiations, told that they couldn't afford the farm. Matt played the victim, telling the world that his children just didn't have the head for business, all while he was sitting on a mountain of undisclosed liquidity. But arrogance is a blinding light. Matt and Caryn became so comfortable with their narrative that they stopped being careful. They started flashing the cash. The trips to Arizona became more frequent and more lavish. The renovations on the new house were extravagant. They were spending money that, on paper, the farm wasn't making. And this is where the crack started to show. You can only tell people you are broke for so long while you are buying vacation homes and custom vehicles before people start to ask questions. The tension in the family wasn't just about emotional baggage. It was about the math. Zach, who isn't always given credit for his intelligence,
knew something was off. He knew the gate numbers. He saw the crowds. When Matt told him the farm wasn't profitable enough to support a succession plan, Zach walked away, not just in anger, but in disbelief. He couldn't prove it, but he knew the numbers were a lie. However, knowing a lie and proving a crime are two very different things. Matt and Caryn had the paperwork to back up their poverty plea. They had the official ledger. They had narrative control on the show. They thought they were untouchable because they believed no one in their circle had the expertise or the patience to dig through 10 years of financial haystacks to find the needle. They underestimated the quiet man in the background. They underestimated the guy who rides a motorcycle and sells houses for a living. They looked at Marek and saw a nice, passive guy who was just happy to be along for the ride. Matt even tried to befriend him, inviting him over, trying to keep him close, thinking he could manipulate Chris just like he manipulated everyone else. That was Matt's fatal error. He didn't realize that Chris's career in high-stakes real estate meant he spent every single day looking at financial discrepancies. Real estate agents are trained to spot when a seller is hiding something. They are trained to look for unpermitted work, for liens, and for cooked books. Chris sat at those dinner tables, listening to Matt complain about money, and his internal alarm bells started ringing. He saw the lifestyle. He saw the anxiety in Amy's eyes when she talked about her settlement. He saw the way Caryn would quickly change the subject whenever specific numbers were mentioned. Chris didn't say a word. He didn't start a fight. He didn't flip a table. He did something much more dangerous. He started watching. And while Matt and Caryn were busy filming their confessionals and planning their dream home, Marek began a silent 6-month deep dive that would eventually unravel the entire scheme. For 6 agonizing months, while the cameras were rolling and the family drama was playing out on national television, a shadow war was being fought in the background. Marek knew that going to the authorities immediately was a mistake. The district attorney needs hard proof, not hunches, and financial crimes are notoriously difficult to prosecute without a smoking gun. If he tipped his hand too early, Matt and Caryn would have time to shred documents, delete servers, and bury the evidence so deep that no forensic team could ever find it. Chris had to be patient. He had to have surgery. He didn't hire a team of high-priced lawyers who would bill by the hour and leak to the press. Instead, reports suggest he turned to the digital world, utilizing advanced forensic accounting software that traces what is known as digital exhaust. Matt, faced with the destruction of his reputation and his freedom, had no choice. He had to turn on Caryn. The alliance was over. The cha-ching team was dead. Insider reports suggest that the fallout was immediate and brutal. Matt allegedly demanded full access to the offshore accounts, watching in real time as the shadow ledger was exposed. The millions that were supposed to be for their golden years were clawed back, dollar by dollar, into the farm's legitimate accounts. But the damage to the relationship is likely terminal. You cannot sleep next to the person who is secretly funneling your empire into a private escape pod. The public face of little people, big world is still maintaining the facade. But if you look closely at the recent seasons, you see the distance. You see the coldness. You see Matt spending more time alone on the tractor. The perfect couple narrative is a ghost. Matt is now a man alone in his castle, surrounded by the wealth he tried to hoard, realizing that the only person who actually had his back was the new husband of the wife he discarded. Marek didn't just expose a crime, he saved the Roloff legacy from total annihilation. He protected Amy's interest, he protected the kids' inheritance, and in a twisted way, he even saved Matt from total ruin. He proved that you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most powerful. While Matt was playing checkers and Caryn was playing chess, Chris was playing 4D solitary, and he won without ever taking a bow. So, where does this leave us? The empire is standing, but the foundation is cracked. The question on everyone's mind is simple. What happens next? Can Matt Roloff ever trust again? Will Caryn face any real consequences? Or did she walk away with a settlement just to keep her mouth shut about Matt's involvement in the initial scheme? And most importantly, what does this mean for the show?
We are watching a slow-motion car crash of a family dynasty, and the editing room can only hide so much. This brings us to the ultimate question for you, the viewer. Did Chris Marek just become the undisputed hero of this entire series? Did he do the right thing by keeping it within the family to save the farm? Or should he have gone straight to the FBI and let the chips fall where they may? This is a moral dilemma that tears the fan base apart. If he goes to the cops, the farm is destroyed and the kids get nothing. By blackmailing the blackmailers, he saved the inheritance, but he let a criminal walk free. I want to hear your verdict. Should Caryn be serving federal time right now, or was exile the better punishment? Drop a comment below with Team Chris if you think he handled this like a boss, or lock her up if you think justice was denied. And don't think for a second that this story ends here. We have received new disturbing reports about a sudden trip Caryn made to Mexico just days after this alleged confrontation. Was she moving the last of the cash? Was she scouting a non-extradition hideout? We are digging into the flight logs and the wire transfers as we speak. You need to be subscribed for the next video, because if you thought the Shadow Ledger was wild, wait until you hear about the Cabo connection. Hit that like button, share this video with every LPBW fan you know, and keep your eyes open. The truth is always stranger than reality TV. I'll see you in the next investigation.